Hi, I'm Rebecca Mander, and you are listening to the Bounce Mindset podcast. During my time as a busy mum and managing director in 2007, I managed significant personal loss and professional challenges as the only woman on the board. I believe we always have a choice, and that a resilient and what I call a bounce mindset is possible for anyone to develop. Join me as we meet some incredible guests, sharing their bounce forward stories, including my own in episode 1. I'm so excited to have you here, and also would like to thank Grow Radio Production and Stephen Bedell for Dragonfly, my very own theme tune. Enjoy. Hi there, and welcome to the Bounce Mindset podcast. I'm really excited to be joined here by Mel, who is just such a force to be reckoned with that it's just thrilling to have her here. We first met over 5 years ago, perhaps, when Mel was volunteered to do our Bounce Mindset program. And I'll explain a little bit why she was volunteered. In fact, she was on our first pilot. So it was really lovely that she's one of our first guests on the Bounce Mindset podcast. Mel has been for over 13 years a senior paralegal with the law firm Travers and Hamlins, but before then she worked in housing management and litigation for more than 25 years, so a really extensive career. And during that time, Mel has had significant work challenges, as we all do, but her largest challenge probably came in 2018 when she received a cancer diagnosis. That's when we were introduced. Her wonderful boss, Yatunde, thought that actually Mel's confidence wasn't quite what it used to be. She'd gone from buzzing around law firms and offices and courts with documents and, flying here, there and everywhere, to somebody who told me she was a shell of her former self and she really wanted to get her confidence back. So we're going to be learning today about how she did that, her positive attitude, her bounce mindset that really got her from the victim to the victor, as you might say. And she went on to win 3 awards. We'll hear more about those later at the National Paralegal Awards, and actually won Paralegal of the Year Midlands, Paralegal of the UK, and Best Civil Litigation Paralegal. So what a list. Mel, oh my goodness, what a bio that is. It's so lovely to have you with us, Mel. Thank you so much.
Nice to see you. Nice to see everybody.
Exactly. It's nice to see everybody and have everybody listening. It's just wonderful. Yeah. So welcome to everybody joining us today. So Mel, you've been in the legal sector, the legal world for over 20 years. How did it all start for you?
I'm going to be brutally honest. It was completely by accident.
Yeah.
I set out my career when I was, what would it have been when I was 16, 17, 18, thinking about leaving school. I didn't think, I want to go into housing management and law. When I first started my career, I was determined that I wanted to go to sixth form. I thought, I'm going to go to college. And then I realised that actually, no, I've done enough education. I didn't enjoy it, didn't want to do it. So I became a dental nurse. And from then I didn't really like that. So I then had the opportunity to have a local firm where I lived, tiny little law, and I did matrimonial work at the time. And it was then that I, from there, moved on into Birmingham City Centre. And I did a stint at doing some criminal work. But that was only for a short period of time before the opportunity came to work with Yatunde and the team at Travers. We'd worked at other firms before and we'd moved around, but we started off the Travers and Hamlins office in middle of 2011. So that's how it started. And I was a secretary to start with, and then just worked my way up to paralegal and senior paralegal.
And so, what were the standout moments in your career, your early career? What did you love about your career?
I think more recently, I think the standout moment is when myself and my boss Yatunde and a handful of other people, and when I look at how big Travers are now compared to what we were back then, there was literally about 6 or 7 of us. And we opened the Birmingham office. Travers didn't have a Birmingham office back in 2011. And to be honoured to be part of that team that opened the Birmingham office and be there on
Yes.
the first day with barely any desks and everything else. That was a huge part, I think, for me. And that's
Yes.
what made me then settle down and think this is definitely the career that I want to take. I've worked with some of the members of the team for more than 20 years, 20
Oh,
years.
yeah.
And we're friends more than just work
Mm,
colleagues.
yes.
Work has to have an element of, you've got to have that enjoyment. Not everybody enjoys going to work, but to have that friendly feeling, and a lot of our clients have said just having that connection just meant a lot. So I think that was the main standout moment, is just
Yes.
really opening the Trowers office in 2011.
Yes. And being part of it,
Yeah.
when we're part of something inaugural, when we're part of something phenomenal, we are, we own it, don't we? We're motivated to stay, and
Yeah.
we're motivated to help something grow, whether that be a project or the opening of an office. And I think that really shines out, because quite often we feel in the workplace like cogs in a wheel, just doing what we're told to do. And that's why I'm often encouraging leaders to delegate and ask people what they think, rather than this is the way to do it this way. And, being part of that opening of that office obviously made you have some feeling of accountability and responsibility to the
I think it was
brand.
the respect that the people at the time. I think I was the only paralegal or the only junior member. I think we had a couple of secretaries that were about to join us or had joined us, but having those senior people around me and just being part of that office just felt it was a huge thing.
Huge thing. Amazing.
Yeah.
And then, through those times I'm sure you've had some very tough cases.
I was so busy. I'd literally go off to court. I'd be in court 5 times a week for clients on various cases for various different scenarios. And I've had some good results. Some you win some, you lose some. But no matter what I did back then, I always gave it my all. So I was just like running around like mad.
Yes.
And yeah, had some good results and some good things, some good times. Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm sure as your career developed, you loved all that, busyness and that variety that you got in your career.
Yeah.
And then you received some devastating news in 2018. You received a cancer diagnosis. Tell us a little bit about that
It was
moment and
it
how
was
that
whilst
felt.
I was recovering in September 2018 for a routine hip replacement, actually, funnily enough. And some things started to go wrong. And it was the usual scenarios that you'd get with bowel cancer. I had pain and my tummy started to like grow, and I thought this isn't quite right. And I went back to the doctors, and I was fobbed off a couple of times by the doctor saying, "Oh, it was irritable bowel syndrome. Go away if it continues, come back." But it was when I started getting blood in my poo that I then was referred on to the hospital. And to cut a long story short, I was diagnosed with stage 4 bowel cancer. I also had a Krukenberg tumour on my ovaries, which meant that my bowel cancer was my primary, and it had spread to my lymph nodes and to my ovaries. So the tumour that I had on my ovaries when they removed it was 30 centimetres. So I literally looked at, if anybody had saw me and thought, actually, I was 49 years old, and thought, oh, actually, you look pregnant. My stomach
Yeah.
literally was absolutely huge.
Oh,
The tumour was growing quite rapidly, to the extent that my consultant operated. I went to see him on the Wednesday, and I said to him, when are you going to operate? And he said, next week. So he literally just said, right, get in here. We're going to operate on you. And the operation I had was called cytoreductive surgery. So they basically meant that they just, not to tell anybody and scare anybody, but they literally opened me up and literally just took out all of the cancer that they could see. The operation was 8 hours long. My husband was going spare. He knew how long it was going to be, but how I never once thought when I was going through all this that I wouldn't make it. I wouldn't be here today. I just my mindset was just, right, I'm going to get through this. I'm going to do this. I'm not ready to go just yet. I'm going to get through it. So I
Yes.
had my operation, came out of hospital on the very early December. It was literally just as everybody was putting their Christmas decorations up. And I remember being out of hospital for about 5 days, and I was putting up the Christmas tree. And bearing in mind that I had 70 staples in my stomach, I was putting up the Christmas tree. So I went through all that, and then I had 6 months worth of chemo, and the chemo ran from January to the July 2019. So there were tough times because I wasn't able to work. Not that a cancer diagnosis is good or bad, but I was very, very lucky in the fact that the treatment that I had, I just wasn't able to even think about working, even if it was working from home. It just, when I had my chemo, I was at the hospital 3 times a week. And then I had a week off. And the week that I had off, I was just sleeping, trying to recover. And then I'd be back at the hospital the following week, 3 times a week. So that all ran through to July 2019. And during that time as well, not many people know that I was diagnosed with Lynch syndrome, which is a mutation in your genes, which means that my cancer that I had was inherited from my parents. It also means, and again, this is one of my positive mindset, it also means that by having Lynch syndrome, I've got a high possibility of having a second bowel cancer again, and various other cancers like breast cancer and stomach cancer and things like that. And it was good to have that diagnosis as well, because I knew where it had come from and what had happened. And once I'd got through my chemo, I had a period of time to just recuperate, really. Trousers were just absolutely brilliant. They didn't push me to come back to work. I think finished chemo in the July, and Travis said to me, don't even think about coming back to work until January next year. So I was able to have that, and I remember it being quite a warm summer. So I was able to have that time sitting in the garden, listening to the birds and relaxing and just getting that recuperation that I needed. So yeah, it was a huge moment in my life, I would say.
Yeah. And that recovery time, the fact that you had your chemo but then slept the next week, the fact that Trowers and Hamlins was so insistent that you didn't return to work. Do you think that self-care that you were in a position to give yourself, do you think that helped your recovery long term?
Most definitely. I was connected on a lot of forums on Facebook and the various sources as to bowel cancer UK and Lynch syndrome UK, and a lot of forums for people were saying, "I've had this diagnosis, I've just had my treatment, and I'm back at work, and how should I feel?" And I felt really, really lucky that Trowers and Hamlins were so supportive, because they knew the extent of what I'd gone through. They didn't say, "Right, I want you back at work next week." And I was just very, very lucky just to have that back end of the year, another 6 months before I even thought about getting back in the workplace again.
Yeah. And isn't it a shame that other firms, evidently from looking at the chat that you were on, other firms don't see that, and they just want to get that person back in. They want to get that golden goose, providing again, don't they? The goose with the golden egg, provide again, without worrying about the person. And yet you've gone on to be such a successful member of the team as you were before, but to win awards, and to your loyalty and your presence there is so important that it's a huge return on their investment. If you were looking at it in the cold light of day, yes, they lost a lot while you're away, but they've gained so much. Absolutely. So now you're firing on all cylinders, and I know you've just had a successful case that you've been working on, and everything's great. But following your diagnosis, what was it like? Let's go back to before the treatment, but that moment when you received the diagnosis. What was going through your mind when you're at work in that sort of limbo space? You've received the diagnosis How do you even function at a time like that?
I was quite lucky. I always keep going back to this word lucky, but I was quite lucky because cancer isn't lucky in the slightest, but I was lucky the fact that in my scenario, I was recovering from, I'd had 6 weeks off from a hip replacement.
Mm-hmm.
So I was lucky in the fact that I was at home recovering anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So I was able to get myself in that mindset and not have to worry about a working life, as well
Mm-hmm.
as thinking about my cancer diagnosis and my treatment and I may
Yes.
not survive this, and what do I want to do in life. For me, it
Yes.
was just taking that little baby steps, one step at a time. It's like, right, I've had this diagnosis, I'm not working, let's get this into my head as to how I'm going to deal with this, how my husband's going to deal with it, because my husband suffers from anxiety really, really badly.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to get him through it as well as me.
Mm-hmm.
So I was lucky in the fact that I wasn't working, so I could just get my mindset in the place that I needed to be to
Mm-hmm.
cope with my operation and the chemo
Mm-hmm.
and everything else.
Yes, absolutely. And so I suppose what you did, you were blessed with that time off at the time, and other people going through something like that while they're working. It must be very challenging. But what you did that we all can do is sit down and think, right, this is horrible. There's no getting away from it. But then your next thought process was, well, what are we going to do about it? What treatment do I need? How are we going to help my husband get through this? How am I going to get through this? And that sort of a pragmatic approach, I guess, you took, the very evidence-based. I want to ask you about catastrophizing later, but it doesn't sound like you were spending a lot of time thinking, what if this happens? What if, what if, what if? You were very much in the moment. Would that be right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was a phrase that my brother used or did tell me: don't worry about what you've got no control over.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. It was just like, I can't worry about this because it's happened.
Mm-hmm.
For whatever reason, it's happened, and I've just got to deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
And you either get busy living or you get busy dying. And I just
Yeah.
thought, it's not my time. Being brutally honest, it wasn't my time to go.
Yeah.
I'm not ready
Yeah.
to go. I'm
Yeah.
gonna fight this. And
Yeah.
no matter how many chemo sessions, no matter how ill I was, I want to survive and live for my husband.
Mm.
And that's just what got me through it. It's just
Yeah.
I've always been, ever since I was little, I've always been that positive mindset person.
Yeah.
So for me, it was just a no-brainer. It's just like, I'm gonna get this done.
Yeah.
It's gonna happen. I can't do anything about it.
No.
And I've got one of the best consultants in the world, and he, didn't once think that, oh, actually I might not be here today. So it was just something that I knew I'd do.
Yeah. Fantastic. And that positive mindset kept you going. That balanced mindset, because it's not about putting your head in the sand and going, I'll be fine, everything's rosy. It's that balanced mindset, isn't it?
Yeah.
But even that suffered when you returned to work. Tell us about your return to work, Mel.
I returned to work in the January 2020. So, gosh, it's 5 years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
January 2020. It was a phased return. So this is just pre-COVID. So I was only doing a few hours a day, building that up gradually. And then I had an infection in my shoulder. Literally just as I'd returned to the office on a phased return, I had an infection in my shoulder. So again, I had a couple of weeks off before that was better. And then I returned, and then COVID hit. So just as COVID hit, Charles and Hamlin said, right, we've heard about this COVID that's here. We're going to have one team that's working from home 1 week and one team that's working from home another week. Then as COVID hit, I was furloughed. So I was furloughed until the July. So by which time, considering I was diagnosed originally in September of 2018, this is 2 years almost worth of me not working.
Mm-hmm.
I was furloughed for about 3 months, which was fine. Again, it was over the summertime, so I was able to just relax and sit in the garden. But by which time I'd had 2 years off work. So it was a huge struggle then to get into my mindset of, right, I've had this diagnosis. It's hit me. I've done it. I've got through it. I've had my time off. We've got COVID, got through that. I'm working from home. And then I sat down and thought, do I really want to do the 9 to 5, running around, being in the office, if the worst scenario came and my cancer returned, my thought was, I don't want to waste time, being brutally honest. I don't want to waste time in working at Trials and Harmonies. I don't want to waste time working at all. And that's when it hit me that I knew I was then struggling. And I just looked at life differently. I just thought life's too short. And is this what I really wanted to do? And it's like you said at the beginning when you had the introduction, it was just, I'd gone from this person that was running around like mad and everybody respected me to being completely lacking in confidence and just knew that I wasn't the person that I used to be pre-diagnosis.
Mm-hmm. And some might say that that realization of life's too short, I want to get out, I want to do something different, would be a positive thing.
Yeah.
But for you, it was not so much.
Not so much, because I knew in the back of my mind that the law business and the legal business and Trowers was what I'd had all my life.
So you really felt that that person you'd left behind 2 years before and this new one was thinking that she wasn't up for it anymore. Yeah. Play it safe and play small.
Yeah.
And rather than someone who's going to go and do something big and scary.
Yeah. And it was, and it's exactly that is one of the words that I've noted in my head is everything seemed alien. Mm-hmm. It was like I've gone from just knowing exactly what I was doing 100% to just like I have no idea what I'm doing anymore.
Yes.
In my job, and everything just seemed alien, which was a huge struggle.
And that resonates, I'm sure, with many people, especially women, not just that have had cancer, but also going through the menopause. You know, we hear lots of women saying, I've gone from being this person that absolutely was so switched on and clued up, knew everything, to somebody who doesn't even know their own name sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah,
and our confidence, you know, or people, women who've returned from maternity leave, it can be months, it can be, you know, weeks, and you come back and you have that feeling that so much has changed. For you, it was, you know, 10 times worse because it was years that you'd been away. But when you go back and things change and new people are in the team, you do feel like an outsider, maybe a little bit more like an alien than you would do.
And it was when I remember when I got back, it was, they've got a new client, and who's this client? And I remember you tend to saying to me, clients are still the same, nothing's changed.
Yeah,
it was just my mindset that I just thought, I don't know this client, or things are different. I don't know this system. We've got a new way of doing this, and you know, it was a struggle.
And your boss, your Tunde, was worried about you.
Yes, massively. She knew that. Probably one of the reasons why I think she'd put me up for furlough in the first place. And she then decided that the opportunity to come up to work with you and the balance mindset. And that was the huge turning point. Again, at that time, being honest, it was just like, oh gosh, have I really got to sit down for however long that we did it for? It was online, sitting down with strangers talking to about you. But it was having those other people in our group and the pilot that were in the same boat, really hadn't gone through a cancer diagnosis necessarily, but had the same issues and had the same problems. And it made me realize that actually there is other people like me, that it's not just me, that I can get back to this. There is other people that are going through this.
Mm-hmm. Yes, you're not alone. You're not the only person feeling like this. And especially during that period when so many people working at home, and even now some companies are largely working at home, you look at someone on a screen and you have a meeting such as we're having now, and you think, gosh, they're fine, their background's fine, everything's calm, no one's, you know, everything's rosy. And so, and also when you have a meeting online, you get straight to the crux of the meeting. There's none of this chit chat while you get your coffees or while you sit down and where you decide where you're sitting. And there's none of that. There's none of that human energy sort of that we can't see, but it's buzzing around. And that connects people. And that's really sad, I think, that we don't get more of that. But I suppose it was intensified for you because you were not only isolated in your feelings, but also physically from the firm, as everybody was during that time.
I think that's what was the biggest struggle. I think it might have been different. Things might have worked out differently if I'd have gone straight back to work and COVID hadn't hit. and I wasn't furloughed. I think if I'd have gone back to work, I might have had a different mindset. But the fact that I'd gone through what I'd gone through, as well as COVID and being isolated at home, and because of my diagnosis, and even now I'm still classed as clinically vulnerable. So at the time, I had the NHS, if you remember, turned around and said those that are clinically vulnerable have to stay at home for 12 weeks. You can't even literally go out the front door. You can open your window. And I thought, oh gosh, we had food parcels we had the NHS food parcels every Thursday, which I used to look forward to, because you would get like potatoes in there and pasta, and it was all because my husband couldn't go out and get the shopping either, because for fear of him going out and picking something up and coming back and giving me an infection. And it was having that part as well was a huge part in it, because I was completely isolated. I had to stay indoors whilst the NHS said, you've got to do that and you've got to stay at home for 12 weeks. And I think that's what was a huge, I think it would have been different if I hadn't have gone through that as well.
Absolutely. I mean, that on its own, forget the cancer diagnosis, forget that. On its own, being told you can't leave the house, either of you, for 12 weeks during a time of fear for everybody. And I remember a lot of us were really grateful for the dog walk. I think we were allowed 30 minutes dog walk a day. Yeah. And, that was our getting out, So to not even be able to do that, not even to be able to choose your shopping and just get a food parcel delivered. I didn't even know that was a thing, or maybe I did and I've forgotten it.
I used to look forward to they used to drop the parcel off every Thursday morning, really quite early, about 8:30. We could still get the online shopping deliveries.
Yes,
but it was COVID, so a lot of them were all just getting booked up. You just couldn't get. So that's why I'd asked for this food parcel, and it was every, and it got a bit monotonous after a while, because after about 4 or 5 weeks, you'd get about 5 tins of tomato soup, and we ended up taking a lot of it to the food bank, because we just ended up with about 20 tins of soup.
Tomato soup. Oh my goodness! What was the recipe, do you think? What was happening for you during that time that helped you bounce forward?
So the bounce mindset was just nothing that I'd done before, and it was just the whole. Again, I won't go into too much detail because of the people that probably haven't done it or are just about to do it, but it was the whole ethos of turning in your mindset as to what think about yourself, and like I say, the victor or the victim. And for me, it was like, I want to get back to the person that I was, not necessarily running around at the same pace I was before, but I want to get back to that confident person that I used to be. And the whole of the program, and the way it was designed, and the way it was run, and the interaction that I had with others, meant that we were all talking about the same things. And that was it. It made me realize that I was good enough, and I could do something. I could do it. And it wasn't nothing to be frightened of. And I think talking to others that had gone through those setbacks as well was a huge thing.
So your advice would be to talk to people who are in the same situation.
Yeah.
So that's getting that support, getting those coffees in with people who have been in that situation and come out, or are coming out of it, or have come out of it. But also looking back, that realization that you can do it.
Yeah.
You must have, in I don't know, lying awake at night or whatever it was, or on the program, thought about what you had achieved and how far you'd come. And was that an important process, do you think, to give you faith in how far you could go?
Yeah, most definitely. And it was, for me, it was just taking that step back, and realizing, and just it's okay to say that you're not okay. It's okay to admit that you're struggling. It's not a failure. It's it's an important part of life. We can't always go through life just saying, yeah, I'm brilliant at this and I can do this. It's just like, okay, admit if you're struggling, talk to somebody, get the help that you need. I was still me at the end of the day. I was still the same person, albeit gone through, all my cancer diagnosis. And even prior to that, my mum and my dad, bless them, they died within 7 months of each other, and both of cancer. So I'd gone through years before that of having, but it was only at this point that I just thought, I'm still me. No matter what I've gone through in my life, and no matter what's happened, I'm still the person that I used to be, and I'm good enough to do what I used to be able to do.
Yes, absolutely. And you were good enough, and absolutely you went ahead and smashed it with those awards. That must have felt amazing. Tell us about the awards.
Again, that was quite odd, because now the National Paralegal Awards is all in person. When I was put for the awards, again, Utundi nominated me. We had this awards ceremony, which was online. And I remember I had my champagne ready, and I put my makeup on, and I got a dress, and I made the effort because it was online. I thought, people are still going to have to see me. And I knew about the civil litigation award, and I knew about the Midlands Award, because I knew that I'd got those. But what I didn't know was I didn't know about the general one, the UK. So once we'd done the ceremony and I'd done my awards, and I was a bit teary at the time because I'd already got these 2 awards, and to be then announced at the very end of the ceremony online actually, Mel Salsbury's now got a Paralegal of the Year UK 2021. So that was it. Floods of tears. And I remember even now on the pictures, you can see my husband David with his thumb up at the back. And that was just amazing to be recognised for what I'd gone through, the testimonials. You have to get some testimonials from clients, and the testimonials from the clients, what they'd said about me and what Utundi had said about me, was just off the scale. So I then went down to London in the October. Luckily, the actual ceremony to collect my awards was in person. So I hot-footed it down to London on the one day. It was now 18th of October 2021 it was, and I had to take a suitcase with me because I knew I was coming back with 3 awards and the certificates as well. So I went down to London for the ceremony, and there was just such an immense, got a huge respect for the amount of people and the paralegals that were there, and in their different roles and for different reasons, and to be recognised, to get 3 awards over and above the people that were already in that room, from the senior people and the judges that had chosen me, was just, even now, my actual awards are sitting on my coffee table downstairs, and they're still there, and I dust them every time I dust them. And they're just there just to remind me. Originally, I was just thinking, I'll just put them away in a cupboard, but they're there to remind me that I've got these as a result of coming back from where I've been to where I am now, and they're there just to remind me every single day that I'm proud of myself for who I am.
Absolutely. And for bouncing forward.
Yeah, exactly.
After that setback, several setbacks.
Yeah.
And if you look back, if you think about the last 10 years, what are the biggest lessons that you think you've learned in life?
You need to ask for help when you can get it, and be proud of what you do. We're not all perfect. We make mistakes, but you only get one chance in life. So just be comfortable with what you're doing. And seek help.
And seize that moment. That moment. I heard a phrase the other day, and we were all talking, and I said, I don't know whether someone said it or I said it, we said, I'd rather get a no than a never know. Yeah. So I'd rather have gone for it and not succeeded than never know whether or not I'd be able to do it. And you might have continued your life thinking that the cancer diagnosis was the end of your professional career.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't. And the sort of type of person that I am is I knew that I wouldn't let it. I knew that I was good enough, and I used to be good enough doing what I was doing.
Yes, absolutely. So what advice would you give for somebody who's listening to this thinking, oh, she sounds amazing, but I'm just not sure I've got it in me to do what she's done?
I think it's like, life is too short. It's not something that you can rehearse. It's not something that you can sit down and think, right, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. Life is what you make it. And you have to when it comes to your career, you have to do what not everybody enjoys going to work, but what is comfortable for you. And just stop and realise that you are good enough, and no matter what anybody says to you, you can do what you do, even if you set little goals, bigger goals, whether you seek help or try and figure it out yourself. It's just, you can do what you can do.
Do you have any new goals, Mel, or plans for the future?
I don't think I do. I think for me, it's all about just living every day as it comes, making sure that I keep the clients happy, keep Trowers and Hamlins happy, they're happy with me, and it's making sure that nothing detracts from that. I'm still the same person as I was 20 years ago, and I've got my confidence back.
Well, Mel, listening to your story professionally, what you've achieved, and personally, not only looking after yourself, but looking after members of your family around you and keeping an eye out on for everybody, and then having that bravery to go through the challenges you went through, but also the way you overcame those challenges, is just such an inspiration to anyone in the workplace who's gone through personal setback and professional setback, because when we are going through something personally, it affects us professionally, doesn't it? And it's just wonderful listening at also how your employer, Trowers and Hamlins, has been. They've really recognised that people are human beings and not human doings, and that in order to get the best value out of people, you have to put the person first and not the profit or the results. And then the rest will, pay in dividends, won't it, for you? Yeah, so, yeah, it's just been fantastic listening to your story. Thank you so much, Mel. It's been wonderful.
You're welcome. You're absolutely welcome. And I hope just like part of what I've been saying just hits, even if it's just a few people. And the one thing I would say as a final point is, if you know that there's some changes in your body or whatever, and you think it may not even be cancerous, it just whatever, just go and get it checked, because the sooner you can be proactive, then it'll help. But yeah,
absolutely go and get it checked.
Yeah.
And if you're still not sure after the check, if you're fobbed off or you feel like you're being fobbed off, check again, you'd say. That's what you did anyway, and I'm very, very, very glad you did, and it's been wonderful. Thank you so much, Mel.
You're welcome.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you for listening to the Bounce Mindset podcast. If you would like a coach in your pocket with free regular hints and tips to help you bounce forward in your career or personal life, then please feel free to go to the Bounce Mindset podcast show notes. And don't forget to leave a review for us. Thank you. Bye.